So, for this week's vlog, I kind of wanted to talk about something that just happened this morning. So I was working from home this morning, which was nice. I just got to hang out with the dogs and work on my laptop from my sofa. And in the background, because I oftentimes like having background noise, I had on this Netflix show that just popped up as one of my recommended things, and it was a show called One of Us. And it's a really interesting show. I'm going to copy the link for just the trailer into the description below so you can check it out yourself. But the show basically follows the life and story of several members of a Hasidic Jewish community in Brooklyn, New York, and what kind of happens in their lives. And the show covers a whole wide variety of topics and issues and things that I don't have the scope or time to really talk about right now. But among those things, I saw this kind of common thread with a lot of stuff that I've been thinking about and reading and researching and just spending time praying and meditating about lately. Because when I think about what it means to be a pastor, what it means to lead people to God, to help them experience what it's like to have a relationship with God, you have to take into account all kinds of things. It's just not as simple as stating the fact and then, oh yeah, okay, of course I'll believe that. It's just not how it works with anyone. I won't say anyone. There might be some people who genuinely have an amazing conversion experience because of something they learned, but it's not universally true. And so this show, as it kind of progressed and as it moved from background noise to now okay, I'm really interested in this, something fascinating is happening or they're talking about. It followed the story of this one guy who tried to break away from this community. And so to give a little background, the Hasidic Jewish community that they were following in New York was a super tight-knit community. They lived their lives by a certain set of morals and codes of conduct and things that you can and cannot do. And if you violate those things, you are punished from the community. And it's similar to other extreme groups, maybe the Amish. Though the Amish, and my familiarity with them, my experiences with the Amish, are not as extreme as the community in this documentary on Netflix made out to be. And so one of the things that kind of came up from all this was that these young people and all these members who were trying to figure out, is this community really the best place for me, for my family? Is this where I can really be alive and know and experience God? As it walked you through or with them in their lives and in their journeys, I kind of saw this pattern developing, that amongst all these people who struggled with the culture of being in this group, there were three things that stuck out. And there are three things that in psychology they talk about are necessary for kind of human survival, and especially for the thriving of youth, of people who anywhere from 10, 11 years old all the way up to 25, 26. That whole period of life, those 15, 16 years, are what psychologists and people call adolescence. There's early, mid, and late adolescence are the three big categories. But I'm digressing. But all that to say, there are three needs that come up for youth. And that's a need for identity, a need for belonging, and a need for meaning. That is there's a need for someone to understand who am I? What's my place here? What's my purpose? But specifically, because I just touched on the other two, specifically identity is about that question, just who am I? What makes me me? What makes me unique? What are my gifts? What are my abilities? Just who am I? And the second one, belonging, is a part of that social gathering kind of thing. That's that social component that is part of just being human. God made us to be social creatures. We're meant to be in community, as healthy as it is for us to occasionally find solitude and silence. I love my hikes, and every week, my intention with getting out on a hike is to get like as far away from people as possible. Partially because that's where I really connect with God, and partially I just need space to re-energize. Like I'm an introvert. It's healthy for me to do that. But belonging is bigger than that. Belonging is about just, you have somewhere that you call your own, or that calls you part of theirs. And so that's a huge part of the teenage experience, is trying to wrestle with identity and belonging in a meaningful way. And oftentimes, as was the case with me, that leads people to make a lot of really poor decisions in an effort to figure out, who am I? And so you experiment, so you try things, and hopefully that doesn't, throw your whole life off track. And then belonging is about, what group does my identity, does my person fit with? And so for me in high school, what's really funny related to belonging is I went through like stages with almost every kind of genre of music you can imagine. I had this punk phase where I had like long Liberty spikes, and then had this awesome huge mohawk. And then I had, a heavy metal phase, and I had a rat phase. Like I can still sing a bunch of Tupac songs just from memory. But I went through all these phases because for me, all of that was about trying to, without realizing it, was all about trying to answer this question, like, who am I and where do I belong? And when I finally kind of felt like I had those answers, I ultimately struggled because though I grew up in the church, I struggled with this meaning component. I didn't have what I now have, and what I would call just a very personal and very dynamic relationship with God, where I see and I feel and I know that God is guiding my life, and God's present in thick and thin, and the good and bad, ups and downs, like that God's there. I didn't have that. And I really struggled with depression and thoughts of suicide and all these kinds of things because of that. But all of that comes from this, what secular psychologists and researchers are calling just this innate need for meaning in our lives, for a divine kind of purpose, for something bigger than ourselves. And so in this video from Netflix, it kind of made me think about all these things, because so many of these people who struggle to fit in with their community, with what it meant to be a Hasidic Jew, which is just an ultra-Orthodox form of Judaism. You often see the men dressed in all black with hats or yarmulkes, and they'll have like long black curls, or just long curls. And then the women oftentimes wear hair coverings and are dressed very modestly. All of that is part of just the culture of, you look a certain way, you act a certain way, you do certain things, like I said. But the video followed these people because it's not always easy to do that. It's not always easy to find your place. And it's especially not easy if you don't feel like a place or a community or a culture that you're in isn't accepting of the ways in which you think, the ways in which you feel, the questions that you have, the things that you're struggling with or wrestling with. And life in general is incredibly difficult if we don't have a sense of meaning. If our life and what we do and what we're doing and what we're putting our time and energy and effort into doesn't fulfill that kind of deep part of us. This early church father from the 3rd century said, like, our hearts will not find rest until they find rest in you, God. Meaning that there's, he 1700 years ago was identifying that what psychologists and sociologists and all these people are saying now, like, we have this innate need for God. And people try to substitute that in any kind of way. I tried to substitute it in drugs and alcohol and all kinds of poor decisions. But ultimately, none of them satisfied. I was left just broken and alone and struggling to find real meaning. And so all of this is because from this random show on Netflix, like, to acknowledge just the fact that we're all looking for these very same things. one of my favorite authors, his name's Henry Nouwen, he talks about, or he said this thing once that I first heard, I think probably about 10 years ago, and it's stuck with me ever since, is, that, he says, that which is most personal is most universal. And I don't think that's, I don't think he necessarily came up with that, but he expanded on it in one of his books in a way that I'd never heard. And what he means is those parts of us that we feel like are just ours, our fears, our hurts, our dreams, our hopes, our passions, that when we get down to the core parts of those things, like our desire to be accepted, our desire for friends, our desire to be loved, our need to be loved, all those kinds of things, when we get down and really name what's at the bottom of it, we find that there's commonality among all of us, that we're all looking for these same kinds of things. And so what's powerful about just the season of life that many of you as middle schoolers and high schoolers are in is you're all beginning that search. But that search oftentimes never really ends, because there's always this push and pull between the world around us to try to draw our hearts away, to get us to pursue other things in order to fill that part of us that needs, that craves God, even if we never articulate it as such. And so part of what I just wanted to say tonight in this vlog is, pay attention to those things. Know that it's okay to have mixed feelings about church or God, to have questions, to have doubts. That's not a bad thing. In fact, usually that's a sign of a growing faith, because it means that you're beginning to think about what you believe. You're not just accepting it because someone told you it. It means that you're really starting to consider, like, well, I don't know what I think about that, or I don't know if that's actually the way I really feel, or, well, what about this, this, and this? And so what I want to encourage you is acknowledge those things. Don't think that there's something wrong with you because you're feeling those things. If anything, celebrate the fact that you have questions. Celebrate the fact that, to some extent, you're struggling. You're struggling with your faith. You're struggling with belonging. You're struggling with identity. Celebrate that, because the reality is everyone else is too. I am too. Like, I regularly wrestle with questions around, like, what does it mean for me to be a pastor? To be a pastor and to be a single man and to be, a friend, a son, a brother. We have all these different kinds of identities, and I'm constantly reevaluating. I don't know how to. I'm constantly trying to put all these things together. You all in middle school, in high school, and beyond are now beginning to do that exact same thing of what we do until the day we die, which is to find our identity, to find our belonging, and to find our meaning. And the reality is that those things can only ever be found in God. Like, my first and foremost identity before pastor, brother, son, or anything else is always child of God. A beloved child of God, just like each one of you. And I know also that I belong to God's family. I belong in God's kingdom, his kingdom here on earth, the place where God is doing amazing good things to redeem, heal, and help people in the brokenness that exists so evidently in our world. That's what it means to be part of God's kingdom, is using your gifts to partner with God in righting wrongs and in healing the brokenness that exists around us and in us, because sin is a very prevalent thing. We all have temptations and thoughts. It's just part of human nature, but it's also something that God is still working to redeem. Like, that's the Christian journey, is letting God work out in us through his grace and by his Spirit to produce, love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, the fruits of the Spirit from Galatians 5. And all those are qualities that every human should strive for. And by God's grace and by the work of his Spirit, we can. But all that's part of just this journey that you've now started, and part of what was what kind of I just started thinking about as I was watching Netflix today. So thank you, Netflix, for inspiring this blog. And if you guys ever want to talk about these kinds of things, if you have questions, if you're wondering about where you're at on your journey, or how you even feel about God, or anything, my door is always open. Email me, shoot me a text, respond to this video down in the comments. I'm honest about the things that I don't have a good answer for, but I'm also confident in the fact that I can find a good answer. And it would be even more fun if you can ask me a question that I don't feel like I have a decent answer for. And what I mean is not the kind of answer. So maybe the right word would be response, that I have a response for, because answer means like I've settled it, like this is the answer. And I don't always feel like I have, or am at the place where I can say this is the answer. But I have a good response based on, this thing called the Wesleyan quadrilateral, a combination of faith, tradition, experience, and reason, and bringing all those things together to respond to questions. And so all that to say, if there's anything that you ever want to talk about, ever want to see covered in a vlog, let me know. I would love to talk about more things that actually mean something to all of you. You guys are great. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. That way you'll be up to date when I upload new vlogs. I'm gonna keep still working on making this like more of a thing that happens during the week, not just once a week. But yeah, subscribe. You'll get updates, and it'll be great. All right. Have a good night. Bye.